The sheet of paper trembled slightly in Mavis Lever's hands. Printed on it were 23 letters arranged in 5-letter groups. Nonsense to anyone else in Britain. But she had just proven they were not nonsense at all. It was March 25, 1941, and the 25-year-old mathematician had cracked the Italian naval cipher. She knew exactly what those letters said and what they meant. The Italian battle fleet was sailing straight into a trap. She ran down the corridor of the converted mansion, past rooms where dozens of other young women leaned over worksheets filled with letter frequencies and probability calculations, past the locked doors where the bomb machines rattled through thousands of rotor positions every hour. She burst into Dilly Knox's office without knocking. "Dilly, I've got it." Knox, the veteran cryptanalyst who had broken Enigma variants before the war, looked up from his desk. He took the decrypt, read it, and his expression changed. This was the moment that defined Bletchley Park, repeated hundreds of times across 4 years of war. The instant when meaningless symbols resolved into meaning, when the impossible became routine, when British codebreakers found themselves reading the enemy's most secret thoughts. But it never stopped being shocking, because what they were reading was often far more terrible than anyone had imagined. The path to that moment had begun in a mansion in Buckinghamshire that the government purchased in 1938 for $5,500. Bletchley Park sat 50 miles northwest of London, close enough to the capital for coordination, far enough away for safety. The red brick Victorian mansion looked like an especially ugly country house. By September 1939, it housed the government code and cipher school, and around 200 people who had just been handed an impossible task: break Enigma, read Germany's military communications. Do it before Britain lost the war. The Enigma machine resembled a typewriter inside a wooden box. Press a key and electrical current flowed through a plug board, then through 3 rotors that could be arranged in any of 60 different positions, each rotor having 26 possible starting points. A light bulb illuminated a letter. That was your cipher. The rotors advanced with every keystroke, constantly changing the encryption. The mathematics were overwhelming. With 3 rotors selected from a set of 5, plus the plug board connections, Enigma had more than 158 million possible settings. The Germans believed it was unbreakable. They were wrong, but only just. Polish cryptanalysts had broken early versions of Enigma in 1932, working in absolute secrecy for 7 years. In July 1939, with German invasion imminent, they shared everything with British and French intelligence. They handed over working Enigma replicas, their methods, and their insights. It was one of the most consequential intelligence gifts in history. But the Germans kept improving the system: new rotors, more complex plugboard settings. Naval Enigma added a 4th rotor. Every change meant starting again from nothing. Alan Turing arrived at Bletchley in September 1939. He was 27 years old, already recognized as a brilliant mathematician. He looked at the Enigma problem and saw it differently from everyone else. The machine's strength was its variability, but that variability followed rules, and rules could be exploited. He designed the bomb, an electromechanical machine that could test thousands of rotor positions rapidly, searching for contradictions. If a setting produced impossible letter combinations, it was discarded. Then the next was tested, and the next. The first bomb, called Victory, began operating in March 1940. It stood 6 feet tall, stretched 7 feet long, weighed a ton, and sounded like 1,000 knitting needles clicking all at once. At first, it worked slowly, then faster as more bombs came online and the cryptanalysts refined their methods. The first significant break into German Army Enigma came in January 1940. The decrypt itself was mundane, a weather report, but it proved the system worked. Over the following months, more breaks followed: supply requests, movement orders, casualty reports. Each decrypt was called a flimsy because it was printed on thin paper that could be destroyed quickly if needed. Gordon Welchman, a mathematician from Cambridge, read those early flimsies and noticed something the pure cryptanalysts had missed. The messages formed a network. Units reported to headquarters. Headquarters issued orders to units. The same call signs appeared again and again. By mapping those relationships, you could predict where to look for messages, which cribs might work, and which links were most valuable. He created an entire intelligence system around the decrypts. They called it traffic analysis. Who was talking to whom, when, and how often. Sometimes the metadata mattered more than the message itself. By May 1940, as Germany invaded France, Bletchley was reading some Luftwaffe traffic regularly. Not all of it, not quickly, but enough to provide warnings of major air operations, enough to matter. The messages themselves were shockingly direct. German military communications were professional, efficient, and detailed. They did not use elaborate internal codes within the cipher. They assumed Enigma was unbreakable, so they wrote plainly. Luftwaffe pilots reported their targets, bomb loads, and fuel states. Army units described their positions, casualties, and supply needs. The Germans were telling the British everything, never knowing anyone was listening. Hugh Alexander, a chess champion recruited to Bletchley, later described reading the decrypts. It was like playing chess when you could see your opponent's pieces, but he could not see yours. But the weight of that advantage was heavy. Joan Clark, one of the few female cryptanalysts working directly on Enigma, remembered breaking a message that detailed casualties from a bombing raid on London. The German report was precise and clinical. So many buildings destroyed. So many casualties estimated. The raid had happened the night before. She had heard the bombs herself, distant thunder from Bletchley. Now she was reading the bomber crew's own assessment of the damage they had caused. It was very strange, she said years later, reading the enemy's mail while they were trying to kill you. The real breakthrough came gradually through 1940 and 1941. More bombs, better cribs, and captured code books from German weather ships and U-boats that provided settings for specific days. Each advance opened new windows into German operations. By mid-1940, they were reading Luftwaffe Enigma reliably. During the Battle of Britain, Fighter Command received ultra-intelligence, the code word for information derived from Enigma decrypts. Not every raid and not with much warning, but enough to help. Position fighter squadrons, to avoid being caught on the ground, and to know when the largest attacks were coming. Then came November 14th, 1940. The decrypt arrived that afternoon. A major Luftwaffe operation was planned for that night. Target, Coventry, the industrial city in the Midlands. Over 400 bombers carrying incendiaries and high explosives. The raid would be massive. Churchill faced an impossible decision. Warn Coventry, evacuate the city, move fire brigades into position. But that would reveal something was wrong. German intelligence would investigate. They might realize Enigma was compromised. The entire intelligence advantage would disappear. Or say nothing. Let the raid proceed. Protect the source. The historical record remains unclear about exactly what Churchill knew and when. But the raid happened. More than 500 bombers dropped 600 tons of bombs on Coventry. 568 people were killed. The medieval cathedral was destroyed. Thousands of buildings were left gutted. At Bletchley, they read the German after-action reports the following day. Detailed assessments of the damage. Self-congratulation on the success of the operation. The cryptanalysts knew they could have warned the city. They knew they had not. Peter Hilton, a young mathematician at Bletchley, later spoke about reading decrypts that described atrocities. We knew things that would make your hair stand on end, and we couldn't tell anyone. We couldn't even tell each other, really. We just had to know it and live with it. The nature of the war changed when Germany invaded the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941. Führer Directive No. 21, issued December 18, 1940, had laid out the plan. The German armed forces must be prepared to crush Soviet Russia in a quick campaign. The directive was sent using the Lorenz cipher, which Bletchley had not yet broken. But once the invasion began, operational orders flowed through Enigma, and those orders revealed something darker than military strategy. The Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing units, followed the Wehrmacht into Soviet territory. Their reports were sent via police Enigma channels, which Bletchley was reading by late 1941. The reports were bureaucratic, precise, and horrifying. So many Jews killed in this town, so many partisans executed in that village. The numbers were exact. The language was euphemistic, but unmistakable. The Codebreakers were reading genocide as it happened. There is no record of anyone at Bletchley refusing to work after reading those decrypts. The knowledge seemed to push them harder. They were reading evil, and the only response was to help end it faster. But the most difficult cipher remained unbroken: naval Enigma. The Navy used 4 rotors instead of 3 and changed their settings more frequently. The Atlantic U-boats were strangling Britain, sinking merchant ships faster than they could be replaced. In 1941, Britain was losing the Battle of the Atlantic. Without breaking naval Enigma, the Codebreakers could only watch. The breakthrough came through capture, not mathematics. On May 9, 1941, the Royal Navy forced U-110 to surface south of Iceland. A boarding party seized the submarine before the crew could destroy their Enigma machine and codebooks. The captured material gave Bletchley the settings they needed. Within weeks, they were reading U-boat traffic. Convoy routes could be altered to avoid wolf packs. U-boats could be hunted. The effect was immediate. Sinkings fell. More supplies reached Britain. Then, in February 1942, the Germans introduced a new naval Enigma variant with additional security features. Bletchley went dark. For 10 months, they could not read U-boat communications. Sinkings surged to crisis levels. Over 600,000 tons of shipping were lost in November 1942 alone. The cryptanalysts worked desperately. New techniques, more bombs. Finally, in December 1942, they broke back in. The Atlantic battle turned once again. The Codebreakers began to understand they were reading the war's nervous system. Every German decision, every order, every situation report flowed through Enigma. Break enough messages quickly enough, and you could see the entire war machine operating in real time. By 1943, Bletchley employed 9,000 people. Most were young women recruited from universities, trained in secrecy, assigned to specific roles. Some operated the bombs. Some performed traffic analysis. Some translated decrypts. Some indexed and filed the intelligence. The operation had become industrial in scale. The bombs ran 24 hours a day in long huts behind the mansion. Each machine tested rotor positions until it found a possible setting, then stopped. The operator would check the setting manually. Usually it was wrong. The bomb would restart and continue the search. When a setting worked, when the gibberish became German, the operator felt a surge of achievement. Then they moved on to the next message. Sarah Baring, a bomb operator, remembered, "You'd be standing there watching the drums spin, and suddenly it would stop and you'd think, is this it? And you'd test it, and sometimes it was. You'd broken the code. You'd done something that mattered. Then you'd start on the next one." But the highest level intelligence came from an entirely different source. In 1940, British intelligence learned that the Germans had developed a new cipher system for Hitler's personal communications with his field marshals. The Lorenz cipher was far more complex than Enigma. 12 rotors, vastly more possible settings. The Germans called it Geheimschreiber, secret writer. Breaking it seemed impossible. But John Tiltman, one of Bletchley's most gifted cryptanalysts, found a way in. In August 1941, a German operator made a mistake. He sent a long message via Lorentz, more than 4,000 characters. The recipient requested a retransmission. The operator sent it again using the same settings but shortened some words, differently the second time. Tiltman now had two versions of the same message encrypted with the same key. That should have been useless, but he exploited it anyway. He extracted the key pattern. It took months of work, but he broke the message. That revealed the logic of the Lorenz system. Still, each message used different settings. They needed a faster way to find them. Tommy Flowers, a post office engineer, proposed building an electronic computer, not a mechanical calculator like the bombs, but a machine using vacuum tubes operating at electronic speed. His colleagues said it could not be done. Too many tubes. They would fail constantly. The machine would never run. Flowers built it anyway. Colossus, the world's first large-scale electronic computer, began operating in February 1944. It filled a room, used 1,500 vacuum tubes, and could process 5,000 characters per second. It could break a Lorentz message in hours instead of weeks. The intelligence it revealed was extraordinary. Hitler's directives to his field marshals traveled through Lorentz, his strategic thinking, his orders for major operations, his assessments of the war. Bletchley was reading the Führer's personal communications. They read his order to hold Stalingrad at all costs, even as the Sixth Army was being surrounded. They read his instructions to commanders in the West about where he believed the Allied invasion would land. They read his orders about V-weapon deployment, jet fighter production, and the defense of Germany itself. One decrypt from March 1944 revealed Hitler's belief that the Allies would invade at Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy. That intelligence was crucial for D-Day planning. The Allies knew their deception was succeeding because they were reading Hitler's own analysis. The Codebreakers never forgot they were reading orders that would kill people. German orders meant German soldiers moved into positions where Allied forces would attack. British and American soldiers would die in those battles, but more would die if the war lasted longer. The ethical weight never disappeared. Break the codes faster and shorten the war. But you were also reading the enemy's mail, something that felt unsporting, even when the enemy was Nazi Germany. You were reading about atrocities you could not stop, learning things you could never share. Security around Ultra was absolute. Decrypts were printed on water-soluble paper that dissolved if burned. They were delivered in locked boxes. They were never copied. After reading, they were returned to Bletchley and destroyed. Only a handful of commanders knew Ultra's true source. Eisenhower did. Montgomery did. Senior air and naval commanders did. Most officers received Ultra intelligence disguised as reconnaissance or agent reports. The rule was simple. Never act on Ultra alone if doing so would reveal the source. Before bombing a target identified by Ultra, reconnaissance aircraft flew over it. Before attacking a U-boat located by decrypts, patrol planes would spot it. The Germans had to believe their communications were secure. That discipline held throughout the war. Germany never realized Enigma had been broken. Churchill received a daily box of the most important decrypts. He called them "my golden eggs" and read them obsessively. The intelligence shaped every major decision: convoy routes, offensive timing, resource allocation. The Allies were not just fighting the war. They were reading the enemy's playbook while playing. Historians estimate Ultra shortened the war by 2 to 4 years. It saved millions of lives. It made D-Day possible. It won the Battle of the Atlantic. Yet at Bletchley, the people doing the work rarely knew the impact. They broke messages, passed them up, moved on. Mavis Lever, who broke the Italian naval cipher before Matapan, learned only after the war that her decrypt enabled the Royal Navy to sink 3 Italian cruisers, killing 2,000 Italian sailors while losing just 3 British sailors. She had known she broke something important. She did not know it had changed a battle. Most Bletchley veterans remained silent for 30 years. The Official Secrets Act bound them. They returned to ordinary lives, carrying secrets they could never share. When the story finally emerged in the 1970s, the world learned what they had done. Alan Turing, who made it possible, died in 1954 without public recognition. Prosecuted for homosexuality in 1952, chemically castrated, and found dead 2 years later from cyanide poisoning. The nation he helped save destroyed him. The others lived longer, but carried the burden. They had read the Holocaust as it happened, read the orders that sent millions to their deaths, known truths that could have reshaped understanding of the war, and remained silent because the mission demanded it. The physical evidence of Bletchley's work was destroyed. The bombs dismantled. Colossus broken apart. Blueprints burned. The government wanted no trace to remain. The site nearly became housing. But the legacy endured. Modern computing traces its roots to Colossus. Modern intelligence agencies learned from Bletchley's methods. Mathematical analysis at industrial scale became central to signals intelligence. And the human story remained. Thousands of young people, mostly unknown, who read the enemy's secrets and never spoke, who carried knowledge they could not share, who knew they were part of something greater. When they first saw German words emerge from the gibberish, they felt triumph. Then, responsibility. Then, they returned to work. There was always another message waiting. The war would be won by soldiers, sailors, and airmen, but it would be won faster, with fewer casualties, because of what happened in those huts at Bletchley Park. The last German military decrypt arrived on May 7, 1945, the day before surrender. Routine traffic, administrative details, the machinery of a dying regime still turning. Then it stopped. The war was over. The greatest code-breaking operation in history had succeeded completely, and almost no one knew it had happened.